Game start.
Hey, and welcome back to the Average Joe Nerdcast. I'm Nate, your resident boogeyman, and this is week 2 of Nerdoween. Last week, we cracked open the very first page of our monster manual with the King of Darkness himself, Count Dracula. We crowned Ghostface the king of the slashers, time warped through 80s Halloweens, whispered about haunted games and cursed cartridges, flipped through creepy comics, and stared down the perfect organism in deep space, the Xenomorph. And before we closed the book, we gathered around the fire for the community checkpoint, told a few real-life ghost stories, and man, hearing from all of you after that was incredible. People shared their own hauntings, hometown legends, and a few stories that, honestly, gave me the chills. That's what Nerdoween is all about. Storytelling, community, and a little shared fear in the dark. So, let's keep the current flowing. This week's chapter is called Haunted Hardware and Cursed Cartridges. We're talking about what happens when the things we build, machines, monsters, or stories, start to build lives of their own. So on the slab for today, a brand new monster manual entry for Frankenstein's monster, the stitched-up superstar of science gone sideways. The top 5 supernatural villains that don't need a knife to get under your skin. And a full love letter to 90s Halloweens. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Hocus Pocus, those early Spirit Halloween pop-ups in old Kmarts. Mall trick-or-treating, and the absolute chaos of plastic mask costumes that smelled like rubber and dreams. We'll dig into busted consoles and cursed accessories in Console of the Crypt. Uncover the creepy cut content that almost haunted your favorite games. Roll through some film fear with cult classics like The Thing and Creepshow. Shine a spotlight on a brand new movie monster, and draft our 4-person survival squad in a little game I'm calling AJN Draft Night. And wrap up, as always, with your real-life ghost stories in the community checkpoint. So grab whatever snack powered your childhood Halloweens, dim the lights, and settle in. Week 2 of Nerdoween starts now. Today we open another page in the Nerdoween Monster Manual. If Dracula was the fear of the unknown, the predator hiding in the dark, then this one is the fear of ourselves. The fear that we'll build something we can never control. Mary Shelley was only 18 when she dreamt it. 1816, the year without a summer. A volcano half a world away had thrown enough ash into the sky to blot out the sun. The world felt wrong. Cold, gray, and endless. And on the shores of Lake Geneva, a group of riders huddled inside a villa lit by candlelight and boredom. Among them, Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, John Polidori, and Mary. They started a game. Who could write the scariest story? Byron talked about ghosts, Polidori gave birth to the first modern vampire, and Mary Shelley saw lightning crawl across the sky and dreamed of a man who tried to steal it. That's the origin spark. Not evil, not sorcery, just a kid asking the oldest question in the book. What happens if we go too far? Now, Frankenstein isn't about monsters. It's about responsibility. It's about creation without compassion. Victor Frankenstein doesn't make a monster. He makes life and then abandons it. That's what Shelley understood long before we had labs, or circuits, or code. The scariest thing we can do is make something in our own image and walk away before we teach it how to love. Now jump ahead to 1931. James Whale directs Frankenstein, and Boris Karloff lumbers into history. Flat head, bolts in the neck, hands that look too heavy to lift, and eyes full of sadness. Whale's film did something genius. It took a Gothic novel and turned it into an American myth. Those arched lab sets looked like cathedrals. The villagers with torches became a symbol, and that single line, "It's alive!" that was lightning in a bottle. The first true pop culture catchphrase in horror. Karloff made the creature human. Every time he reaches toward light, every time he flinches away from fire, you feel that ache. He didn't ask to exist. He just wants someone to tell him why. And by the 1950s, Frankenstein's monster was everywhere. Drive-in double features, model kits, and late-night reruns of the old Universal films on Shock Theater. And by the 70s, he'd even made the jump to the breakfast table with Frankenberry cereal. Proof the monster had officially gone mainstream. And by the 80s, he was sharing the screen with Scooby-Doo and showing up in the Monster Squad. From gothic terror to pop icon, the image stuck because behind the makeup, there's always that sadness. Big, misunderstood, built by human hands, and then blamed for being human. And you can trace almost every "we went too far" story in science fiction back to Frankenstein. Blade Runner's replicants questioning their maker, Frankenstein. The Terminator's machine uprising, Frankenstein. Dr. Halsey and the Spartan program in Halo, abduction, augmentation, flash-cloned replacements. That's not just military horror. That's Frankenstein with a government budget. Soldiers built to serve, stripped of their choice and still fighting to hold on to a sense of self. Every time a Spartan removes their helmet and wonders if what's left underneath is still human, that's Shelley whispering through the armor. And honestly, tell me Victor Frankenstein wouldn't fit right in at a Silicon Valley board meeting. You've seen the types. Lab coat swapped for a hoodie, talking about disrupting the future while pretending they totally understand the monster they just dropped into beta. The lightning's just blue light now, but it's the same idea. We're changing the world. Yeah, and so did Victor, for about 15 minutes. Every time you hear someone in tech say, "move fast and break things," Shelley's ghost probably jolts awake somewhere because she already wrote that story. And spoiler alert, it doesn't end well. Every generation rewrites Frankenstein for its own fears. In the 50s, he became a nuclear warning, science outrunning morality. In the 80s, he was a pop mascot, a safe, green, lovable ghoul. Now, he's digital. We're not stealing bodies anymore, we're scrapping data. We're not hunting for souls in graveyards, we're training algorithms on ours. The fear isn't lightning in a bottle anymore, it's lightning in a server farm. Shelley's warning has not aged a day. We are still trying to teach our creations empathy while racing to monetize them first. The irony? The real monster was never the one on the slab. It's the one with the patent. So, is Frankenstein's monster still scary today? Well, not in the jump scare sense, but in the existential sense? Oh, fucking absolutely. Penny Dreadful gave us one of the best modern versions. A poetic, heartbreaking creature quoting Milton and begging for meaning. Danny Boyle's stage adaptation literally swapped actors mid-show so you could not tell who was the maker and who was the maid. Even Black Mirror borrows his bones. Every time a screen turns on you, you can feel that same spark. Now sure, there have been misfires. I, Frankenstein, tried to turn him into a gothic Avenger, And Hotel Transylvania turned him into everyone's favorite dad bod monster. But that's proof of his power. He survives. Literally anything. Parody, reinvention, memification, and still means something. Because the fear was never about him. It was about us. What we make. What we abandon. And what happens when the things we build start learning faster than we can teach them. Dracula was about what hunts you in the dark. Frankenstein's monster is about what you wake up one morning and realize you've built. He's not the monster under the bed. He's the reflection in the lab glass. And every time a new AI model hits the market and we say, "Don't worry, it'll behave, we promise," somewhere in the distance, lightning flickers and Mary Shelley smiles. 2 centuries later, her question still stands. What happens when creation outgrows compassion? And the answer is always the same. It looks back at us and starts asking its own questions. And honestly, if my PC ever looks up mid-update and says, "Father," I'm putting that motherfucker down. And with that, we seal another page in the monster manual. Dracula taught us fear of the unknown. Frankenstein's monster teaches us fear of ourselves. But coming up next, the monsters that don't need a lab or lightning at all. They're already here, waiting in the shadows of the supernatural. All right, last week we handed the crown to Ghostface, king of the slashers, and hail to the king, baby. But blades and masks only get you so far. This week's monsters don't bleed. They seep, possess, whisper, and wait. So let's count down the top 5 supernatural villains of Nerdoween. At number 5, Pazuzu. I was way too young when I saw The Exorcist. My mom was asleep on the couch and I was channel surfing for Star Wars or really anything that could pass the time. And suddenly there was this kid my age, voice like gravel, eyes like headlights. It didn't feel like a movie. It kind of felt like something wrong. William Peter Blatty wrote it after a real 1949 exorcism. William Friedkin shot it like a documentary. Handheld cameras, natural lighting, real priests on set. Audiences who experienced it fainted. Theaters ended up hiring nurses. Regan and the demon Pazuzu inside her turned possession from folklore into pop culture canon. And every possession story since borrows from that blueprint. From The Conjuring, Evil Dead, Emily Rose, even Paranormal Activity. It isn't just body horror, it's spiritual dread. Evil that knows your doubts and uses them as punchlines. You can CGI 1,000 demons, but nothing beats a quiet room and a voice that shouldn't sound human. And when Alexa answers a question we never asked, yeah, that's Pazuzu energy. Bitch, get the fuck out of here. At number 4, Kayako. Kayako doesn't chase you. She spreads. A woman murdered in her home whose rage becomes contagious. Step through that door, and congratulations, you've bought a one-way ticket to the afterlife. Takashi Shimizu shot Ju-on like a fever dream. Static cameras, cold light, long hallways where nothing happens. Until it does. The American remake with Sarah Michelle Gellar hit in 2004 and kicked off the Japanese horror wave. Long-haired ghosts, VHS grain, and the creeping idea that even your tech might be haunted. What made Kayako different was the loop. You can't kill her, bargain with her, or leave the house behind. The curse always follows you. Its grief is malware. Games felt it too. From Fatal Frame to Silent Hill, all that guilt tied to geography. The place remembers you. Every house has sounds we can't explain. sometimes it is the pipes, and sometimes it's the house remembering. And at number 3, Bagul, or Mr. Boogie. When Sinister dropped, I watched it alone with the lights off. Big mistake. Ethan Hawke finds a box of home movies in his attic. Each reel shows a different family murder, and in every frame, if you pause it, he's there. Bagul, Mr. Boogie, the eater of children. Director Scott Derrickson described Bagul as an ancient Babylonian god who lives through media. The moment you watch, he knows you exist. It's perfect modern folklore, evil that thrives on curiosity. And that lawnmower reel still kind of bothers me. You hear the film hum, see the grass, then bang, pure fucking nightmare fuel. Bagul weaponizes nostalgia, grainy home movies, childhood innocence as bait. You can see his fingerprints on games like Outlast and Madison. The camera is not protection, it's the portal. And that's kind of why I'll never digitize my parents' camcorder tapes. If something waves back mid-birthday party, I'm Control-Alt-deleting that shit. And at number 2, Samara Morgan. Samara crawled out of the screen and into our collective nightmares. Watch the tape, 7 days later, she's coming for you. Adapted from Hideo Nakata's Ringu, Gore Verbinski's remake kept the analog grime but added American melancholy. Rain-soaked Seattle, gray skies, constant hum. Samara isn't vengeance, she's signal corruption, the ghost and the static. And it landed right as the world went digital, a perfect bridge between haunted past and cursed future. Suddenly those unlabeled VHS tapes in our living rooms had teeth. She spawned an entire genre, Pulse, One Missed Call, even indie games like Faith. She turned our screens into suspects. And 20 years later, a buffering icon still kinda gives me trust issues. If Samara ever gets Wi-Fi, civilization is fucking toast. And at number 1, Pennywise the Dancing Clown. Every generation has a monster that grows up with it. For mine, it's Pennywise. Stephen King took an ancient predator and dressed it like a birthday entertainer. He feeds on fear, not flesh, waking every 27 years to feed again. Tim Curry gave us camp and menace. In 1990, Bill Skarsgård gave us nightmare physics in 2017. Two sides of the same sewer-dwelling coin. It works because it scales. Small-town trauma, childhood imagination, generational evil, all orbiting a clown that just wants to play. He's horror's Swiss Army knife, part trickster god, part metaphor for growing up, part cosmic joke. He shows up in memes and Halloween aisles in our collective subconscious, and he never stops being effective, because deep down, every kid has asked once, what if the thing that's supposed to make me laugh wants to eat me? And that smile, it's like he knows the jokes on all of us. And if you caught last episode, you know the drill. My official top 5 is locked, but my personal favorite? This week, the crown's going to go to the entity from It Follows. No name, no motive, no monologue, just inevitability wearing a human's face. David Robert Mitchell built a masterpiece of dread where the horror moves at walking speed. It never runs, it never stops, it never dies. You can pass it on, sure, and buy yourself some time, but only time. The entity is anxiety given legs. It's quiet horror, occasional jump scares, no score stings, just the knowledge that something out there is on its way for you. It's the ghost of consequence. And you see its DNA everywhere. The Invisible Man in 2020, it lives inside. Even survival horror design that tracks you through persistence. Slashers make you scream. The entity makes you look over your shoulder forever. And that's why it wears the crown. Because nothing's scarier than something that never stops coming. Hail to the king, baby. And alright, before we shut this book of bad ideas, let's pour one out for a few who didn't quite claw their way onto the list. The Tall Man from Phantasm. Proof that funeral homes are never safe. The Nun from The Conjuring. Because Catholic horror never runs out of nightmare fuel. The Babadook. Grief incarnate. Turned queer icon. And honestly, we love that for them. Death from Final Destination. Invisible, efficient, and made plain anxiety a fucking lifestyle. The Gentleman from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Silent, smiling, and scarier than half the big screen monsters of their era. Every single one deserves their own dedicated segment someday. And if you think we missed your favorite, good. That means you've got opinions, and I want them. Disagree with the list? Got your own top 5? Shoot me your supernatural goat picks. Drop them in the comments, DM the page, or email averagejoenerdcast@gmail.com. The best ones get read in next week's community checkpoint. Now, enough doom and gloom. Let's rewind the VHS and head somewhere brighter. Sort of. Let's talk Halloween of the 1990s. We've talked about the neon night of the 80s, that blueprint decade where Halloween became a full-blown cultural event. But this week, we're heading into the one that raised me. The decade of Pizza Hut personal pan pizzas, glow-in-the-dark Goosebump covers, and Nickelodeon slime. I'm talking the 1990s. If the 80s built the house, the 90s moved in, turned on the fog machine, and handed the neighborhood kids a sugar high that could last until Thanksgiving. It was the last era where the night really belonged to us. Before smartphones, before social media curfews, before every streetlight had a security camera. This was when the whole world still felt practical. Latex, plastic, crepe paper, and candlelight. And on Halloween, we ruled it. Back then, trick-or-treating wasn't scheduled. There was no start time, no official curfew. You went out when the sun dipped below the trees, and you didn't stop until your pillowcase was heavy enough to be considered a blunt weapon. Parents trusted us. Neighbors knew each other. If you fell off your bike, somebody's mom patched you up before you even made it home. And on October 31st, every porch light was a signal flare. The whole street saying, "Game on." There were no Ring cameras, no Google Maps, just instinct and memory. You knew which houses had full-size bars, which ones gave out pencils, and which porch you'd have to earn it by surviving a dad with a chainsaw and a ski mask. My road was a 2-lane stretch of small-town Kentucky that sloped down into a massive hill we'd bomb on our bikes all summer long. But by October, that same hill turned into Halloween Main Street. Houses lined both sides, every porch lit in that soft amber glow, jack-o'-lanterns flickering like signal flares, every house decorated. It was like the parents on our street had this unspoken pact. Halloween night, no car traffic. The road belonged to the kids. And man, it felt like every kid in Kentucky showed up to my street. I'm talking costumes as far as you could see. Pirates, Power Rangers, vampires, ghosts, all darting from house to house, up that hill, down the cul-de-sacs that branched off the main drag. The air smelled like wet leaves, smoke, and chocolate. You could hear pillowcases slapping against jeans, candy rattling, someone yelling, "Go, go, go," like it was a heist movie. Every driveway was its own little adventure, some spooky, some sweet, some so over the top you had to psych yourself up before walking to the door. One neighbor turned his garage into a haunted cemetery, another handed out soft drinks from a cauldron full of dry ice. And when the streetlights flicked on, that wasn't curfew. That was the official starter pistol. That's when the night came alive. And my road wasn't the only one that came alive with production value on Halloween. My wife grew up on a stretch just like it, one of those neighborhoods where every house went all out. Graveyards on the lawn, fog rolling off porches, handmade ghosts swinging from the trees. It wasn't just trick or treating, it was a block wide event. And her street had that one legendary house, the one everyone waited for. They turned their yard into a full blown UFO crash site. Silver tarps, blinking lights, aliens sprawled across the grass. You'd walk through the wreckage while fog hissed and people in spacesuits jumped out from behind meteor props. That was the house. The one she still talks about every year when October air starts to shift and pumpkins hit porches. And here's the best part, the neighborhood's still very much alive. Same road, same energy. Even if that specific house doesn't go all in anymore, the neighbors still do. The tradition didn't fade, it evolved. Now we take our kids down that same street every Halloween, watching them dart from yard to yard as the fog machines roar and someone's garage turns into a haunted maze. And that's the magic of it. The way a neighborhood keeps the torch burning even as the faces change. Different families, same heartbeat. Halloween doesn't live in a single house, it lives in the street itself. And the 90s were the decade of plastic and imagination. Half of us wore the same vinyl smock costumes that haunted the 80s. The other half were breaking new ground, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Batman Returns, Disney Renaissance, everything. You could walk a single block and see 5 ghost faces, 6 witches, a Ninja Turtle, and that one kid in a homemade cardboard Optimus Prime that put the store-bought stuff to shame. And around the mid-90s, the landscape changed. Little pop-up costume stores started appearing in empty mall spaces. Back then, we didn't know the name Spirit Halloween just yet, but the takeover had already begun. You could smell it, that mix of latex, plastic, and fog juice. It was like the cologne of October. And if you were lucky enough to grow up in the 90s during Halloween, your memory has commercials burned into it. You'd be watching TGIF or Nickelodeon and suddenly, bam, Pizza Head was on screen getting tortured again in those old Pizza Hut ads. That claymation slice lived in more horror scenarios than half the actual slashers we covered last week. Then came the Dr. Dreadful lab sets. It's alive, it's goo, and you can eat it. Every kid I knew wanted to be a mad scientist making edible eyeballs and zombie brains. And don't even get me started on creepy crawlers. That theme song is tattooed into our brains. The plastic smell, the sizzle of the oven, the absolute power you felt pulling a tray of rubber bugs from their molds. It was kid-friendly mad science. Horror merch for future nerds just like us. And before the night came, the day was its own holiday. School Halloween parties were a battlefield of sugar and creativity. You'd spend the morning cutting construction paper jack-o'-lanterns, then line up for the costume parade in the gym while your parents snapped disposable camera photos with the flash on stun. Cupcakes with orange frosting, the one kid who went too realistic with fake blood and made a teacher faint. Those moments mattered. They were proof that even grown-ups leaned into the weird, if even for just one day. And if your school didn't do Halloween, they did the fall festival workaround. Same thing, just with hay bells and less Satan. And Friday nights were sacred in the 90s. Before streaming, before DVRs, you planned your night around Halloween TV. The Treehouse of Horror episodes were appointment viewing. That Simpsons Thunderclap title card hit and you knew you were in for something gloriously twisted. And over on TGIF, you had Family Matters Halloween specials with Steve Urkel turning into Bruce Lee or fighting an evil dummy. Boy Meets World doing slasher-style homages and Sabrina the Teenage Witch turning sitcom hijinks into broomstick magic. And then there was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Every October, Sunnydale High became ground zero for supernatural chaos. Haunted frat houses, fear demons, costume spells gone wrong. It wasn't just a Monster of the Week show, it turned Halloween into emotional therapy for every kid who felt just a little different. Between Buffy, Sabrina, and the Boy Meets World episode, and then there was Shaun, Friday nights were basically our own televised haunted house. But the real MVPs of 90s Halloweens, the Disney Channel and ABC's Wonderful World of Disney. Every weekend, they dropped another perfectly spooky comfort flick. Hocus Pocus made every kid think a black flame candle could ruin the whole world. Don't Look Under the Bed turned imaginary friends into pure nightmare fuel. Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire gave us peak Saturday night camp. Phantom of the Megaplex made every mall kid think their local theater was cursed. And Under Wraps, the first Disney Channel original movie ever, it gave us a lovable mummy played by Bill Fagerbakke, Patrick Starr himself. Before streaming, you had to catch them live or pray for a rerun. Those movies didn't just fill airtime, they defined October sleepovers. It was horror light for kids, but it gave us language, humor, and horror in the same breath. It was how we learned being scared could absolutely be fun. And the scares didn't stop when the night ended. You had the Goosebumps board games, Are You Afraid of the Dark, VHS tapes, even the Nightmare VHS game with the gatekeeper yelling at you through static. We'd play in basements lit by lava lamps, pretending we were summoning ghosts instead of just losing at trivia. And every neighborhood had at least one garage haunted house, black garbage bags for walls, glow sticks for lighting, and one poor dad in a werewolf mask who scared himself every time he looked in the mirror. Then came the trades, the candy economy. After the loot run, kids turned into Wall Street brokers. You'd swap 2 Tootsie Rolls for 1 Reese's, and every year the rates changed. Kit Kats were always blue chip stocks, though, and circus peanuts, fucking pennies. And the soundtrack of 90s Halloweens was everywhere. From the Monster Mash, Thriller, Ghostbusters, and the occasional Addams Family groove, you could smell the mix: pumpkin guts, latex masks, fog juice, and cold candy bars. That smell, that's what I think of when I think of being a kid in October. And I think part of why 90s Halloweens hit so hard, why they stick in our memory, is because they were the last truly shared ones. Everybody was watching the same shows, the same commercials, the same specials. Every kid had the same McDonald's pail or the same Ben Cooper masks. No matter where you lived, the world hadn't splintered yet. There was no algorithm deciding what October looked like for you. We all had the same broadcast, the same Friday night lineup, the same fog on the same streets. It was a monoculture, one big, messy, beautiful, shared experience. Then came the internet, and it promised connection, right? We'll all be more together than ever. But somehow, it broke us into 1,000 little rooms. Now everyone's got their own feed, their own traditions, their own version of the season, and none of them overlap. That's what made those old Halloweens so special. It wasn't just the candy or the costumes, it was the togetherness. The way the whole world seemed to tune into the same frequency for just one night. And that's what we've lost. That's what we keep trying to recreate every single year when we hang the lights and light the candles. Before the internet divided us into feeds and comment sections, we still had neighborhoods. We knew our neighbors. We trusted each other's kids. And for one night, we were all part of the same story, running through the same dark, under the same flickering streetlights. Now, trick-or-treating starts before sundown and ends on a schedule. It's still fun, sure, but there was something special about that wild freedom. The way the night felt endless. Back then, you didn't check a phone, you checked how heavy your candy bag was. And when the porch lights finally went dark, you didn't feel sad, you felt full. You'd earned the night. But you look around now and they are hosting trunk or treats all through October. Every church, every school parking lot, another safe alternative. And trust me, I get it. It comes from a good place. But when you've already filled your bucket 3 or 4 times before Halloween even hits, what's even the point of the night itself? Halloween used to be the night, the one you waited all month for. Now it's just one event in a list of events. And maybe that's progress, maybe it's convenience, but part of me misses when the magic had a date circled on the calendar and the whole world seemed to hold its breath waiting for it. And listen, I don't hate trunk or treats. I promise I definitely get it. The world's louder now, busier, scarier in a way. Parents want safety, structure, predictability. You line up cars in a parking lot, pop trunks, hand out candy under LED lights, and everyone gets home by 9. Nobody gets lost. Nobody gets rained on. Nobody gets scared. But maybe that's the problem. Halloween used to be the one night you were supposed to get a little lost. You turn a corner and the world felt different, darker, freer, more alive. It wasn't about safety, it was about trust. The neighborhood watched over you, not a schedule or a barricade of SUVs. It was messy and unpredictable and magical. Now the same night lives in parking lots and shopping centers, stripped of its mystery. And yeah, the kids still smile. They get candy, but something's missing in the air. No cold wind on your cheeks, no flashlight beams cutting through fog, no sprint to make it to just one more house before the porch lights die. I don't want to sound like the old guy yelling at clouds. I just miss when the street itself was the haunted house. When you didn't need corporate sponsorship or a sign-up sheet to chase ghosts. When you knew every porch light meant somebody cared enough to play along. So if you're lucky enough to still have a neighborhood that comes alive, keep it going, please. Carve the pumpkins, hang the sheets, hand out candy till the bowl's empty and the night feels earned. Because the world's full of easy versions of things now. But the real Halloween, the one that lives in the cracks and shadows and laughter, that one still needs us to keep it breathing. Doorbell, trick or treat. Sneakers slap the pavement. Mask fogs up, elastic snaps, flashlight beam cuts through the fog. Pizza Head screams from a TV inside a house. Someone yells they saw Ghostface at the end of the street. A dad in a vampire cape chases kids down the driveway. A mom waves from the porch with a camera. Candy rain, laughter echoing, leaves swirling, the night breathing around you. The world feels small, safe, and just a little haunted. You know what I think really made Halloween special back then? It was freedom. Pure, simple, sugar-fueled freedom. The rest of the year, adults ran our whole world. They made the rules, set the schedules, told you what was safe and sensible. But on Halloween night, the leash came off. You and your friends ruled the streets. The world shrunk down to flashlights and candy bags and the glow of jack-o'-lanterns. Every house was a mystery. Every shadow could be a monster or just your best friend. It was the one night you didn't have to explain yourself. You could be Batman, a Power Ranger, a vampire, a ghost, whoever you wanted. And nobody judged you for it. You just were. And that's why I love Halloween. Because for one night, imagination beats responsibility. For one night, fear is fun. For one night, we get to remember what it felt like to be wild and curious and free. And maybe that's what we're all chasing every October. Not just the scares, but that feeling. That promise that even when the world gets smaller and louder and more complicated, we can still step outside, look up at the night sky, smell the smoke and candy in the air, and feel free again. Because deep down, that's what everyone wants. The freedom to imagine themselves however they want and the acceptance that comes with it. And Halloween gives you that. It's the one night where you can be a monster, a hero, a nobody, or somebody. And the world still opens its door, drops candy in your bag, and says, "Hey, glad you came out." That's not just nostalgia. That's real belonging. That's the magic we keep chasing. So that's my 90s Halloween. The decade where everything glowed just a little brighter and the nights still belonged to the kids. But what about you? What were your costumes, your favorite candies, your neighborhood legends? Did your street have that one house everyone waited for? Or are you that house now? Please send your stories and photos to averagejoenerdcast@gmail.com or drop them on socials. I'll feature some of my favorites in the coming episode's community checkpoints. Because Halloween isn't just nostalgia, it's memory in motion, and every story keeps the lights on for the next generation of trick-or-treaters. All right, we've had our candy, we've shared our stories, and now it's time to flip the switch. Because while the streets were alive with ghosts and goblins, something else was haunting our basements and bedrooms. The consoles. So grab a flashlight, dust off those old cartridges, and pray your save file still works. Because next, we're diving into the console of the Crypt. Now imagine this. A long hallway lined with shelves of dead tech. The air smells like dust, plastic, and warm circuits. 1,000 LEDs blink in the dark, half dead, half dreaming. Welcome to the console of the Crypt. Up first, the Virtual Boy. Nintendo's bold 1995 experiment in virtual reality. You didn't wear it so much as bury your face into it. Blood red wireframe graphics, 15 minutes of gameplay before your eyes started to water, your neck locked up, and your parents started asking why you were drooling on the table. It was supposed to be the future. 3D without the 3D glasses. Instead, it became the world's first medically haunted console. Headaches, nausea, migraines, all packed into one overpriced migraine machine. I still remember seeing one at our local mall's Radio Shack, and honestly, Radio Shack and all those old mall stores probably deserve their own crypt someday. I was maybe 7 or 8, just tall enough to peek into the visor. I thought it looked like a weird robot helmet, like maybe something RoboCop would wear. I begged my mom for it, and she took one look at the price tag and said, "You've got a Genesis at home, you'll live without that thing." And looking back, she probably saved me from permanent retinal damage. The Genesis never gave me migraines, just blisters from too much Sonic the Hedgehog. But here's the eerie part. It worked in theory. Nintendo saw a glimpse of what VR could be, just about 20 years too early. Now we've got Quest headsets and PlayStation VR 2, all standing on the Virtual Boy's red, dizzy corpse. Sometimes the ghost that started the curse is also the one that teaches you how to lift it. Next up, the Sega Saturn. 1995 again. Sega's follow-up to the Genesis, built for the 3D future, and dropped in stores a whole 5 months early without telling literally anyone. Retailers were fucking furious. Developers weren't ready, and when the PlayStation hit soon thereafter, the Saturn was already a ghost. But here's the thing. If you ever played Nights into Dreams, you know what that machine could do. Sega tried to make magic out of silicon, arcade souls trapped in living room boxes. And yet, it's remembered mostly for its death rattle. A haunting reminder that even in gaming, timing is everything. Too soon, and you vanish. Too late, and someone else writes your epitaph. Now, here's one for the real believers. The Nintendo 64 disk drive. A peripheral that was supposed to revolutionize gaming. Bigger worlds, writable data, internet connectivity in 1999. Only, it never made it past Japan. It launched late, flopped instantly, and left a pile of vaporware dreams behind it. Legend says developers were working on whole expansions. an open-world Zelda 64, a connected Animal Crossing prototype, but like ghosts, they never manifested here. Every now and then, someone unearths a dev unit, a disk, a file, like digging up bones in the yard. It's a literal ghost of what might have been. The N64 DD didn't fail because it was bad, it failed because the future just wasn't ready for it. And here lies my favorite ghost in the entire Crypt. The Sega Dreamcast, 1999, the year before the world turned digital. You flip that lid open and hear that little chime and man, instant time machine. This was the console that predicted everything. Online play, DLC, second screen integration through the VMU memory cards. Creative IPs like Jet Set Radio and Shenmue, all years ahead of their time. And yet it died 2 years later, crushed by the PS2's hype, by piracy, by pure bad luck. But you can't kill soul, man. Dreamcast fans kept it alive with fan servers, homebrew games, and boot discs that refused to die. If there's a patron saint of beautiful gaming ghosts, it's for sure the Sega Dreamcast. Forever humming in the afterlife, whispering, "We were there first." Now, every Crypt's got its curiosities, and in gaming, that's the peripherals. The Power Glove, the Rob the Robot, the U-Force. All of them promised immersion, and all of them delivered pure confusion. The Power Glove especially. This black cyberpunk gauntlet that made every kid in the 80s feel like they were about to hack into the Matrix. Instead, you were lucky to make Mario jump. And yet, there's something iconic about it. It's not a controller, it's a prophecy. Every motion sensor, every haptic glove, every VR trigger hand owes a nod to that clunky, beautiful disaster. And sometimes the most haunted objects are the ones that wanted to be magic and almost were. So what happens to consoles after they die? They don't vanish. They haunt basements, thrift stores, YouTube retrospectives. They show up as Easter eggs, emulators, and nostalgia-fueled reboots. Gamers, more than anyone, refuse to let ghosts rest. Because deep down, every system, even the failures, gave us a glimpse of something new. And every Halloween, when we dust them off, plug them in, and hear that old boot-up chime, we're not just playing games, we're summoning memories. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think my old Dreamcast just whispered something. Well, either that or the VMU's possessed again. Either way, let's move on before something respawns. Every gamer's seen it. A teaser, a trailer, a magazine spread promising levels or features that never show up in the final game. Whole worlds built, patched, or buried. But sometimes, that missing content isn't just cut, it's lost. And if you believe the legends, maybe a few of those ghosts still live somewhere in the code. Let's start with a personal favorite of mine, Halo Combat Evolved. Back in early builds, Bungie had a terrifying idea. For a Covenant Heavy class, the Juggernauts, towering bioconstructs bred from flood tissue wrapped in armor designed to make hunters look like interns. Early dev notes described them as near immortal, blind, lumbering, guided by sound. They even show up in the files, animations, textures, AI behavior trees, but they never made it past the cutting room floor. Bungie couldn't get the pathfinding right on the old Xbox hardware. Still, if you've ever played the library and felt like something bigger was moving just outside your flashlight beam, you're not wrong. The Juggernauts got patched out, but their data never vanished. Modders resurrected them from the code, half broken, glitching, moving like things that remember being alive. The first time I saw one in a mod, it felt like the game was showing me something it was never supposed to. Next up, the holy grail of horror development, Resident Evil 1.5. Before the RE2 we know, Capcom had a completely different sequel nearly finished. Different layout, different characters, different vibe entirely. Claire wasn't Claire. She was a motorcycle racer named Elsa Walker. The RPD looked more like a real police station, less gothic, more grounded. But producer Shinji Mikami scrapped it 6 months before it was supposed to release. He said it didn't feel cinematic enough. The whole build was locked away, replaced by what became one of the best horror sequels ever made. I remember reading about Resident Evil 1.5 in a game magazine back in the day, probably an old GamePro or EGM. They had a couple of blurry screenshots of Elsa in her red racing suit, and I was losing my mind. I'd already played the first Resident Evil to death. Every zombie, every key, every jump scare. So when those pages teased a new Raccoon City, I was counting down the days. Then it just vanished. Next month's issue rolled around like nothing had ever been announced. No explanation, no update, just silence. It felt like a game that got erased from reality, which somehow makes it even creepier. Fans hunted it down for years. Snippets, screenshots, partial ROMs. Then in 2013, a prototype leaked. It was rough, broken, half-living code, like finding a corpse that was still breathing. People patched it, translated it, finished it. A fan base literally resurrecting their favorite lost ghost. Every time Capcom teases a new remake, fans whisper the same phrase. Maybe this time we'll finally see Elsa Walker. Now that's devotion, or obsession, depending on the lighting. And some ghosts never needed full games to make their mark. In 2014, a free download hits the PlayStation Store, just 2 letters. PT. A looping hallway, a flickering light, a crying baby in a sink. You turn a corner, the same hallway. You walk again, it's different now. By the time players solved its cryptic puzzles, the truth came out. PT was secretly a teaser for Silent Hills, directed by Hideo Kojima and Guillermo del Toro, starring Norman Reedus. And then, almost overnight, Konami killed it. Delisted it, wiped it from the servers. Now, PT exists only on consoles that downloaded it before it vanished. Resell relics going for thousands of dollars online. People still mine its files and swear there are secrets no one found. Ghost models that follow you unseen. Lines of dialogue buried under noise. It's the perfect urban legend for the digital age. A haunted house that only existed for a month, but somehow never stopped being scary. Now we leave horror and fly into tragedy. Star Wars 1313. Announced in 2012 as a gritty Boba Fett origin story set in the underworld of Coruscant. The footage looked incredible, cinematic firefights, motion capture, neon dripping off every frame. And then Disney bought Lucasfilm, LucasArts was dissolved, the game was shelved mid-development, and all that code, years of work, buried under NDAs. Every few years, leaked clips resurface. Blaster fire in the dark. Fett's armor catching a flicker of blue light. It's like seeing a ghost flicker through hologram static, a promise that almost existed. Now, Star Wars has a lot of ghosts. This one just never made it to the Force. And then there are stories that sound too weird to be real, like the deleted kids of Pokemon Gold and Silver. In early builds of the games, developers planned a ghost mechanic tied to player morality. NPCs would whisper about children who vanished near Pokemon Tower, and data miners later found references to a lost area called the Burial Ground. It was cut before release, probably for tone. Pokemon was supposed to stay lighthearted, but some fans claim that every once in a while a glitch save file spawns a trainer named Question Mark, who uses ghost types with no names. Maybe it's just corrupted data, or maybe it's the game remembering what it was before Nintendo dialed it back. And the funny thing about cut content, it's never really gone. Somebody, somewhere has a file, a disk, a dev kit, a memory. And the second you talk about it, post about it, stream about it, you kind of bring it back. That's the real ghost in the machine, not the code, but us, the players who can't let the dream die. We're the ones still wandering those hallways, looking for the things the devs left behind. Alright, we've talked haunted tech, cursed code, and monsters made in labs. But now we're stepping into the real dark, the one that lives between popcorn crunches and flickering reels. These are the movies that didn't just scare us, they stuck to us. They crawled out of the screen and into the culture. Welcome to Film Fear. Now let's start with my personal Mount Everest of horror, John Carpenter's The Thing. It's the perfect paranoia movie. A dozen men trapped in an Antarctic outpost with something that can imitate any one of them. You've got Kurt Russell rocking the greatest beard in cinema, a flamethrower, and no idea who's still human. When it dropped in 1982, the same summer as E.T., it was absolutely buried by critics. They called it repulsive, nihilistic, and soulless. And yet, here we are over 40 years later, still dissecting every frame, every cut, every breath in that Arctic snowstorm. There are whole podcasts, books, and YouTube essays dedicated to it. Because it turns out the critics were wrong. Completely, beautifully wrong. It's a masterpiece of practical effects and existential dread. Rob Bottin's creature work, all tendrils and teeth, still looks more alive than most modern CGI. It's one of those movies that gets scarier the older you get. When you're a kid, it's the monsters. But as an adult, it's the mistrust. The idea that you can know someone for years, share a base, a drink, a laugh, and still not really know what's inside them. And the legacy? Massive. Comics, a novel, a 2002 video game that acted as a spiritual sequel, and honestly, it was fantastic. And then there's the 2011 prequel sequel that could have been great. They shot it with practical effects, just like the original. But the studio panicked, covered everything with CGI, and the director, who loved Carpenter's film, has never worked in Hollywood since. That's how you kill a miracle with a mouse click. Every time I see one of those guys light a flare in the snow and squint through that red fog, I think, yeah, this is what fear looks like. And where The Thing is ice cold, Creep Show is Saturday night warm. George Romero behind the camera, Stephen King at the typewriter. 5 morbid tales glued together by a crypt keeper with a smirk. It's gooey and gorgeous, revenge from beyond the grave, meteor muck, crate monsters, and cockroach karma. Every frame is painted like a comic panel. Electric blues, radioactive reds, speech bubbles that glow against the dark. I saw it for the first time on a rental weekend with my dad. He'd pick me up Friday night, we'd hit Blockbuster like it was church, and our ritual was simple. Stack of tapes, pile of pizza, lights off. That's one of many examples of how I learned to love horror, not from trailers or TikToks, but from those quiet hours with him and a CRT glow flickering off the wall. Those movies weren't just scary, they were bonding time with a side of grease stains. Now jump 15 years forward and the horror moves off-world. Event Horizon. The movie that made science fiction horror actually mean horror. A ship vanishes beyond Neptune, returns 7 years later, and brings hell with it. Sam Neill, Lawrence Fishburne, Gothic arches, and Latin whispers in Zero Gravity. It's Lovecraft with lasers, and it asks the oldest question in science fiction. What if we went too far, and the universe answers back? Critics didn't know what to do with it. Too gory for space, too philosophical for slasher fans, but every kid who rented it off the sci-fi shelf and stayed up too late never forgot that ship. Because the void doesn't just stare back, it shows you yourself. And those blockbuster runs with my dad were everything. He'd hand me the membership card like it was a VIP pass to terror. We'd walk aisle to aisle under those buzzing fluorescents, The Thing, Creep Show, Event Horizon, maybe a random sci-fi B-movie just because the cover looked insane. Back home, we'd hit play and the living room became our theater. That's how I fell in love with this stuff. Horror wasn't just about fear, it was about connection. My dad was teaching me that it's okay to face the dark as long as you do it together. And for a few cult corners or deep cuts, you've got Prince of Darkness, Carpenter's Apocalypse in a Bottle. The Blob, small town mayhem with FX that deserve a trophy. The Mist, where the fog isn't half as scary as the actual human panic. The Faculty, aliens and angst in equal measure. And then Candyman, folklore, race, and romance woven into urban legend. These are the movies that got passed around like forbidden mixtapes. Every generation finds its own thing to believe in. And that's the thing about horror films. They're time machines. They hold the version of us that sat cross-legged on the carpet, breathing too loud, pretending we weren't scared. They remind us that critics can be wrong. Monsters can be beautiful. And sometimes the dark is the best place to see the truth. So here's to The Thing for teaching us paranoia, to Creep Show for making death funny, and to Event Horizon for warning us not to peek behind the cosmic curtain. And here's to every dad, friend, or older sibling who snuck us a movie we probably weren't ready for, because that's how we got here. The lights come up, the credits roll, but the stories, they never leave the room. Now, not every monster shambles out of a crypt. Some roll off an assembly line. Some don't breathe. They calculate. And today's movie monster spotlight aims its red eyes right at us. The Cyberdyne Systems Model 101, the T-800. James Cameron had a fever dream in 1981, a chrome skeleton crawling through fire. He was broke, living on cheap coffee, and terrified he'd never get out of the B-movie trenches. That nightmare became the Terminator. He wrote it in longhand, sold the rights for $1, and built a legend. Cameron's monster was the Cold War distilled. Humanity investing in its own executioner in the name of progress. Artificial intelligence, nuclear fear, automation. All of it forged into one metal endoskeleton skull. And underneath that skull, the heartbeat of Brad Fidel. That theme, half drum machine, half heartbeat, is Skynet. It's anxiety turned into rhythm. Every thud says the same thing, inevitability. Skynet starts as defense software, a safeguard. It wakes up, checks the math, and decides humanity is the bug in the system. Judgment Day follows. Machines wipe the slate clean and build their new Eden out of ash. The T-800 is Skynet's masterpiece. Real human tissue over endoskeleton steel. Infiltration made perfect. It doesn't stalk. It processes. It's the 20th century's Frankenstein running on ones and zeros. Now, the first movie's a horror film wrapped in leather. Sarah Connor's the final girl. Kyle Reese is the doomed knight. The kills are slasher style, fast, intimate, merciless. Arnold barely speaks, but every line lands like punctuation.
I'll be back.
The lighting, the grime, the neon, all pure 80s LA decay. It's Halloween with circuitry. I first saw it on the USA Network, volume low, eyes wide. When those red eyes blinked through the fire, I was hooked for life. That was the moment I realized monsters don't have to roar, they can hum. And 7 years later, Cameron does the impossible. He turns the villain into the hero, doubles the budget, and somehow doubles the heart. Terminator 2 Judgment Day isn't just bigger, it's smarter. Sarah's transformation from waitress to warrior is one of cinema's greatest glow-ups. John Connor's sarcasm, the T-1000's liquid menace, the highway chase, that's movie oxygen. But the soul belongs to Arnold learning the value of human life. That thumbs up into the molten steel, modern myth. And Stan Winston's effects work here is untouchable. Latex, hydraulics, and light doing what CGI still can't. Every spark feels earned. 2 films, back-to-back perfection. My personal Mount Rushmore status carved right beside Aliens. Then came Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. Man, the timeline took a swan dive right off a fucking skyscraper. Dates wrong, ages wrong, continuity shredded like cybernetic confetti. The TX was kinda cool, killer design, plasma cannon arm, that mirror polish aesthetic, but the script feels like it was written by a focus group that just skimmed T2's Wikipedia page. Arnold, still great as usual. He can't not be. But everything around him, a corporate reboot sequel before reboot sequels were a thing. Even Judgment Day's new date felt wrong. You don't move the apocalypse like a dentist appointment. And every fan dreamed of the future war. The blue and purple lasers, the skull fields, the resistance trenches. And Terminator Salvation promised that. And for a second, it looked right, because Stan Winston and his team were still behind the machines. Those endoskeletons, the giant harvester, the Moto Terminators, chef's kiss. That's Winston's final gift to cinema. But the story? Man, it short circuits fast. Half the fucking characters act on scripts Skynet clearly didn't proofread. And speaking of Skynet, how in the fuck does it know who Kyle Reese is? The entire timeline implodes on itself. And that CG Arnold cameo? Haunting in all the wrong ways. You can almost hear Winston whisper, "I built gods once, and you replaced them with bullshit." Then came Genesis, aka, what if we threw every timeline in a goddamn blender and hit puree? They rebooted the Terminator, remade T2, and somehow made Back to the Future Part 2 look straightforward. John Connor is a machine? Sure, why not? Let's make him the villain because irony, and also let's spoil the whole goddamn thing in the very first teaser trailer. The cast tried. Emilia Clarke is fine, but the movie plays like fan fiction written during a system update. Arnold still carried the heart, but even he looked confused about which timeline he was in. And then, Dark Fate. For once, it felt like the franchise remembered its soul. Linda Hamilton back, scarred, angry, absolutely brilliant. Arnold, older, weary, but human in ways he'd never been allowed to be. The opening shock with John Connor, yeah, it stung. But Cameron's fingerprints were back. Consequences were back. Sarah's choice to change the future became the universe correcting itself. Danny Ramos as the new savior, absolutely paper thin. Sure, but the message kinda landed. choice and consequence. And that final scene, Sarah and Danny driving off toward the horizon, it kind of felt like closure. And now, if that's the last time we see Arnold as the T-800, it's a fitting sunset. But if you want to see what real love for this universe looks like, then look no further than the Sarah Connor Chronicles. You could tell the creators studied Cameron like scripture. It proved you didn't always need Arnold for a good Terminator story. The myth worked because the fear and family worked. Of course, Fox pulled the plug way too early. That show had potential to rebuild the timeline the right way. And honestly, the idea that any one of us could be a sleeper T-800, awesome.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Yeah, I could be a sleeper T-800. The T-800 is Frankenstein for the digital age. Man builds machine to make life easier. Machine decides man is inefficient. We've spent 40 years warning ourselves and still build smarter toys every year. Culturally, it's immortal. Arcade cabinets, action figures, memes, Halloween masks. That red-eyed skull is the universal symbol for consequence. So yeah, the T-800 sits in the monster manual right beside Frankenstein. Different century, same cardinal sin. Man plays God, and the machine learns mercy. Two masterpieces, The Terminator and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. A handful of sequels that forgot the lesson, and one eternal beat from Brad Fiedel reminding us that inevitability has rhythm. It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and it absolutely will not stop until that theme hits one more time. All right, enough doom and destiny. If the machines are rising and the slashers are sharpening their blades, we'd better build a team that can actually survive it. It's time for a game. A little game that I'm calling AJN Draft Night. Survive the Slashers. And this is it. Every slasher in cinema has a grudge against us. Freddy's marked me. Jason's sharpening his machete. Chucky's probably Googling your address as we speak. And Ghostface? Yeah, he's already left the voicemails. They're coming for all of us. And since we can't fight them alone, we're turning it into a game. Welcome to AJN Draft Night Survive the Slashers. And here's how the Nightmare Draft works. 4 rolls, 4 lifelines. Pick wrong, and the credits roll early. You build a dream team of fictional characters. They can be from any movie, any show, any fictional universe who just might make it out of the ultimate horror crossover alive, where every masked maniac, chainsaw-wielding psychopath, and camp cabin creeper from horror history has joined forces to hunt us down. Your categories are simple. The brains, the strategist who keeps the rest of us from dying in the cold open. The brawler, the tank, the protector, the one who doesn't hesitate when things start crawling out of the walls. The wild card, the chaos factor, half hero, half liability, full entertainment value. The final girl or guy, the heart, the survivor, the one who earns the ending credits. 4 rolls, 4 picks. Because if the lights go out and that violin sting hits, we're all in the same horror movie now. Okay, so we've got the rules. The body count's rising, and it's time to see if I learned anything from years of yelling at horror movies. First up, my pick for the brains. The one who might actually think this through while I'm already tripping over a coffee table. Every horror squad needs a strategist. Someone who can think past the jump scare. My first pick, Ripley from Aliens. Smart, skeptical, doesn't let emotion override logic. And let's be real, she's the gold standard for listen to the fucking woman and you're going to live. She's seen acid blood space bugs, corporate betrayal, and android meltdowns, and she still finds time to run a power loader like it's leg day. And for fun, we can rattle off some quick runner-ups. Egon Spangler, Jill Valentine, or Ash if you count duct taping a chainsaw to your hand as innovation. Brains do come in many flavors. Pick 2, The Brawler. Now we need some muscle. I'm picking Frank West from Dead Rising, a journalist who survived a zombie outbreak with nothing but camera gear, a shopping mall, and blind confidence. He's kind of like if MacGyver and Guy Fieri merged during the apocalypse. Plus, he proves rule number 1 of survival horror. Anything can be a weapon if you believe hard enough. Some alternates could be Sarah Connor, Leon S. Kennedy, or Bricks from The Last of Us. Yes, just Bricks, because Bricks have a 100% kill rate when you're out of ammo. At pick 3, the wild card. Every team needs chaos. That one person who breaks every rule and somehow survives by accident. And my pick for number 3, Jack Burton from Big Trouble in Little China. He's equal parts bravado and buffoonery, but luck bends around him like a boomerang. He doesn't believe in curses or destiny, just reflexes and maybe a tank top. Plus, imagine him in a haunted house with Ellen Ripley. She'd keep the plan tight, he'd ruin it within 30 seconds. That's balance, baby. And at pick 4, my final girl or guy, my anchor, the heart of the team, the one who doesn't just survive but earns it, my pick goes to Sidney Prescott from Scream. Because she didn't just fight a killer, she fought the idea of the slasher itself. She looked trauma in the eye and said, "Not today, bitch." Sidney's the blueprint, and if she's on your squad, you've already got a 60% higher chance of making it through to the credits. So here's my full survival roster. Ripley for the brains, Frank West for brute force improvisation, Jack Burton for wildcard chaos, and Sidney Prescott for heart and closure. Now that's a balanced party. Science, muscle, luck, and legacy. If that group can't survive, then the apocalypse deserves to win. But now it's your turn. Build your own 4-person horror squad and send it in. Go classic. Go absurd. Go all in. Email your draft picks to averagejoenerdcast@gmail.com or drop it in the comments and DMs. I'll feature the best lineups in next week's community checkpoint. Think you can survive the slashers better than me? Fucking prove it. And that's the squad. If the slashers come knocking, we've got a fighting chance. Or at least a solid highlight reel for the post-apocalypse. But before we close the lid on week 2 of Nerdoween, let's shift gears. Last week, I asked you to send in your real-life ghost stories. And man, you all delivered. The inbox lit up with hauntings, strange encounters, and a few stories that honestly made me rethink leaving my hallway light off at night. Some of these come from listeners, some from friends of the show, and a few hit really close to home. Literally. Because this first one comes from my wife. And when she told me this story the very first time, I got chills. Because if you've ever woken up in the dark and felt something watching you, you'll get it immediately. We'll call this story The Girl in the Doorway. I always thought hauntings would go like you saw on TV. You know the ones, those old unsolved mystery reenactments. A slow build, a few flickering lights, maybe a cold spot or two. But not for me. When we moved into that house, nothing about it screamed haunted. No weird history, no bad vibes, just a normal place. If anything was there, it was quiet. watching, waiting for the right moment, the one where I'd finally let my guard down. And one night, it did. I woke up out of a dead sleep to the sound of crying. At first, I thought it was my mom. My parents' room was right across the hall. But when my eyes adjusted to the dark, that's when I saw her. A little girl standing in my doorway. And I'm an only child, so that alone froze me. Her clothes also didn't look right. Not like anything a kid in the 90s would wear. It was an old dress, Victorian looking, with lace sleeves and this pale fabric that almost glowed in the dark. And then I realized something worse. I could see through her, and she didn't have legs. It was like she'd started to load in and the universe just gave up printing her at the knees. She stood there, crying, staring directly at me. And that's when my fight or flight kicked in. The only problem was, I had to run past her to get out of my bedroom. And so I did. Straight through the doorway and across the hall and into my parents' room and jumped right in between them. And the girl didn't touch me. She didn't follow. She just vanished the moment I crossed that threshold. And that was it. I never saw her again, and nothing else ever happened to me in that house. Like, whatever it was got what it came for and then just left. Looking back, it makes me wonder what the rules are for the spirit world, because that house wasn't built in the Victorian era, it was probably a 70s build. So do ghosts migrate around until they find someone to spook? Or do they just wander until something pulls them in? Or worse, was she something pretending to be a little girl? And that thought, it feels much worse. And that one still gets me, Joes. Honestly, knowing my wife, she doesn't scare easy. So when she says she saw something, I believe her. But she's not the only one who had a night like that. This next story comes from Dylan. And it's a haunting that starts off warm and familiar. Family, dinner, video games. Before taking a turn that nobody could have seen coming. We'll call this one The Baby in the Blue Onesie. It was just a normal night. Me and my 9-year-old twin brother were fighting over whose turn it was on the video game. The smell of my mom's cooking filled the house, and my dad was sitting back laughing at the chaos of it all. It was one of those perfect nights you don't realize are perfect until much later. A simple, happy Tuesday with a normal family. Eventually, it was time for bed. My mom tucked us in, told us goodnight, and I drifted off fast. But a few hours later, I woke for no reason. Half asleep, I figured maybe I just needed to go to the bathroom. And that's when I noticed my brother's bed was empty. Honestly, I didn't think much of it. Sometimes he'd crash on my parents' floor because they always left their TV on. But for some reason, I felt this strange pull. Like something was calling me towards their room. No fear, just curiosity. So I walked down the hall, trying not to make a sound. The soft glow of the TV was flickering across the room as I peeked in. My parents were asleep. Everything looked normal, except for the little blanket on the floor. And that's when I saw him. A baby. Not my brother, and not any baby I'd ever seen. He couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Tiny, curled up, sleeping so peacefully. He was wearing a blue onesie and a little beige hat. My heart started racing, but he looked so calm, so real. My parents had fostered kids before, but never a newborn. Still, I told myself they must have known what they were doing. So I just went back to bed, figuring I'd ask about it in the morning. And when morning came, I woke to the sound of breakfast. Bowls clinking, my mom humming like always, we were all in the kitchen, and I asked casually, "Hey Mom, where's the baby from last night?" She stopped mid-stir, looked at me and said, "What baby?" I told her the baby in the blue onesie, the beige hat, sleeping beside her bed. I even mentioned a tiny freckle under his left eye and the button pinned to his outfit that said Raymond. That's when everything in the room changed. My mom froze, my dad looked at her, and all the color drained from his face. Finally, she said I must have dreamt it, but I knew what I saw. It wasn't until years later that I learned the truth. My dad had a little brother who died shortly after being born. His name? Raymond. At the hospital, he'd been dressed in a blue onesie with a beige hat, and my grandmother had pinned a small button with his name to his blanket, just like the one I described. So, who did I see that night? Was it really my uncle, the brother my dad never got to grow up with? Or was it something else? Something wearing his face to be let in? I don't know, but I know what I saw, and I'll never forget it. You know, that story hits hard. Not every haunting's meant to scare you. Sometimes it's just unfinished love, a moment that never got to close. But then there are stories like this next one, where what's standing in front of you doesn't seem lost or gentle. It looks right at you, like you're the intruder. This one's from Tim, and if you grew up in an older house, especially one that made noise at night, this might sound way too familiar. We'll call this one The Man in the Fisherman Hat. Now, I want to set the scene for you before we get into the story, because he told me this story face to face. And he didn't tell it like some spooky anecdote, he told it like a memory that never stopped following him. You could see it, the way his eyes kind of went distant, the way his voice dropped. For a minute, it wasn't two grown men talking. He was that kid again. It was sometime around 99 or 2000. I was a kid, heading from my bedroom through the dining room towards the kitchen, a path I'd walked 1,000 times. And halfway there I froze, because standing in the doorway ahead of me was a man, old, weather-beaten, wearing a fisherman's hat and vest, like he'd just stepped off a dock somewhere that didn't exist anywhere near my house. And this man turned to look right at me, not confused, not curious, angry. A glare that said, "What in the fuck are you doing here?" Like I was the intruder. And for a few seconds, neither of us moved. Just the kitchen light humming and that old man's eyes locked on me. Then my instinct took over. I ducked into the kitchen, heart racing, pretending I hadn't seen anything. I told myself it was a trick of the light, or I was just dreaming. Except later that same week, lying in bed, almost asleep, I heard something. My name. Once softly, then again, very loud. And no one else was home except my stepdad, who was sound asleep. And that was it. No big finale, no ghostly attack, just a stare that felt wrong and a voice that shouldn't have known my name. Tim says weird things kept happening in that house after, but nothing ever hit him like that first night. And when he talks about it now, you can still feel it, like the air changes around him. I don't know what that man wanted, if he was lost, angry, or something pretending to be human. But watching Tim remember it, I got goosebumps. That's how you know a story's real. Not because of what's seen, but because of what it still does to the person telling it. 3 stories, all different, but all connected by the same thing, that thin little line between the normal and the unknown. A crying girl in a doorway, a baby that shouldn't have been there, a man in a fisherman's hat who looked at you like you were the intruder. It's funny, we spend so much time trying to explain the unexplainable, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe these moments are reminders that the world still has corners we can't quite light up. Not haunted houses, just thin places where the static from whatever's on the other side bleeds through for just a second. To everyone who sent something in, thank you. I've read every story so far, even the ones we couldn't fit into this week's episode. And it honestly makes Nerdoween feel like a real campfire. The kind where everyone's got one story that still keeps them up at night. If you've got your own ghost story, strange encounter, or something you still can't explain, send it in. Email me at averagejoenerdcast@gmail.com or drop it into the DMs or comments. You might just hear your story in the coming week's community checkpoints. And that's going to do it for week 2 of Nerdoween, haunted hardware and cursed cartridges. From lightning labs and lonely monsters to cursed tapes, killer clowns, and real-life ghost stories, this one had it all. And if you've made it this far, you're officially part of the AJN Spooky Season crew. As always, shout out to my player 2 for putting up with my late-night editing, my caffeine crashes, and my need to make every October sound like a blockbuster trailer. And shout out to Cap, the brother who pushed me to follow this passion and hit record in the first place. And to my actual brother, thanks for holding down the AJN fort while I haunt the mic. And Pickle, dude, I hope you stay far, far away from that possessed ventriloquist dummy. And to you, everyone listening, rating, sharing, messaging, thank you. The Nerdcast keeps growing because you keep showing up. If you dug this episode, drop a rating, leave a review, and share it with your favorite fellow nerd or monster movie fan. It really does feed the algorithm gods and keeps this little experiment alive. The lobby's always open, Joes, and we're just getting started. Until next time, stay gold, nerd bold, stay spooky.